amazing. You
And
can
if you want,
propose papers according to the requirements with the theme that we are proposing, and make sure that you can also apply for the arts special department that is meant to strengthen the connection between theology, literature, history, philosophy, and the arts. And you will find the information on our website. And we are looking forward to see you all in November in Yash. Having this said, I would like to introduce Kirsten to you. She is our best friend, and as you already know, she is one of the major George MacDonald scholar who lives in Ottawa Valley in Canada. She lectures internationally on MacDonald, and you are probably aware of the amazing events that she organized last year all over the world. She speaks on the Inklings, faith and the arts. She is co-editor of Informing the Inklings, and she has published many chapters and articles in the field and appears in the documentary The Fantasy Makers. And Even she's now currently completing a book on McDonald's. She also authored, and it is our honor that she authored the forewords and afterwards to the Romanian translations of George MacDonald's The Golden Key and Barfield's The Child of the Giant, which are the first to be translated into Romanian and introduced to the public in Romania. We are honored that she is a founding member of the C.S. Lewis and Kindred Society, Kindred Spirits Society of Eastern and Central Europe, and also she is the co-chair of the George MacDonald's Society. She directs the Linlat and Theology and Arts Conference, which is an amazing ministry in Ottawa Valley, and go online to see the launching of introducing this amazing ministry that she is doing here on her farm. We are very thankful for you, Kirsten, and there are no words to express our thankfulness for being the host of the C.S. Lewis Connected. And please go ahead and introduce us and be our guide as always.
Thank you, Denise. It's always so much fun to be here. That's the word I want to say today. It's a delight and a fun. And all the things that Denise has mentioned and talked about are things that are done in community with a whole bunch of people. And that's part of our delight. It's part of what the Inklings modeled for us. And they're gathering together and creating together. And it is what Agora Christi and their work with the C.S. Lewis Conference and events like this model so well. And so we are plunging forth today in continuing this relationality, this exploring together in community, learning together in community. Welcome to all the new faces who've not been at a C.S. Lewis Connected event before. It's delightful to have you here. To give you a sense of the sort of the layout and what we do, we're gonna aim to chat for roughly an hour with Loren, and then we'll have a time for questions from you guys. And then for the last half hour, that's about 8:30 p.m. Romanian time, we're going to move into our after chat. And that's going to be facilitated by the irreplaceable Brenton Dickinson, joining us from Prince Edward Island. And Brenton sort of hosts that time for us. If you're able to stay for that more informal time, we'll be delighted to have you. But we also completely understand if you need to scooch off before that happens in the last half hour. And I'll remind you the way we do this with questions is if you send your questions directly to Agora Christi, so if you hit the meeting group chat and you find on there Agora Christi, and that's the name of the ministry that the Vasilius oversee, send your questions to that. And then we'll amalgamate similar questions together, and it helps us be able to do that. It also helps me because I'm not good at speaking to Loren and looking at your faces and also reading the chat. Some people, like Brenton, are brilliant at multitasking that way. I'm not. So if you could please send your questions to be asked to Agora Christie, and then they will send them on directly to me, so I know to look for those red letters, direct message. Um, and um, anyone who sends me personal messages in the chat, I will probably see them afterwards and be delighted to see them, but I probably won't be able to take them in for the same reason because I'm just not good at multitasking that way. Um, if this is back to the community aspect, if Loren or if anyone mentions an author or a book or an artist while we're having this conversation, please feel free to drop a link to those into the chat. We all learn so much from each other, and this is a way to contribute to that. And sorry, I'm distracted for a moment because I just realized that in my old-fashioned farmhouse, the link to my electricity isn't on for the cord. So this will take me 1 second. This is very embarrassing, but apologies for that. And there. Okay, there. That was the sound I wanted to hear. My computer just said to me I was about to run out of battery power.
It was a good reminder that we are all real and it is in real time.
Absolutely. And we enter this time with prayers that internet will work for Loren out on his island as well, which is a good way to pivot towards that. Done with housekeeping now. Thank you all for joining us from all corners of the globe. As Denise has highlighted, people joining us from South Africa, from Poland, from the west coast of Canada and the States. For some of you, it's really early in the morning. For others, we're well into the night already. And we're coming from different disciplines, different vocations, different ecumenical positions, even different faiths. Certainly different tastes and hobbies and life experiences. And it's good to be together. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to all of you a friend and mentor, a family friend, Loren Wilkinson, Professor Emeritus of Philosophy and Interdisciplinary Studies at Regent College, Vancouver. The term interdisciplinary studies allows for a lot of latitude, and my own courses from Loren included Christianity and literature, the Christian imagination, a brilliant seminar on Dante, which also introduced me to the Inkling Charles Williams. And maybe I'll add here that it was actually in Loren's home that I first began my first ever paper on George MacDonald was at Loren's farm. Many graduate students over the years have first met Gerard Manley Hopkins, George Herbert, even Dostoevsky, Buechner, Tolkien, Barfield in Loren's classes. And indeed, they've also met Madeline Longle, George MacDonald, Kenneth Graham in classes taught by his wife, Mary Ruth. But Loren and Mary Ruth are also renowned for their atypical graduate courses. And if you thought they just taught in the classroom, you would have no understanding of who Loren and Mary Ruth are because they need to be outside, like all of us, and they're really good at modeling why and how we all need to be outside and not just inside. Graduate courses such as Technology, Wilderness, and Creation, which occurs whilst rowing 18th century replica boats through small islands off of the west coast of Canada. In fact, the picture of Loren used to advertise this event, in that picture, you can see the huge oar in his hands, and he's actually rowing one of those boats in that photograph. Another course called Food, Creation, Community, and Communion, a course which explores the biological, ecological, psychological, aesthetic, spiritual, agricultural, historic, economic, and ethical aspects of what, why, and how we eat. And then, not stopping there, the course walks students not just through classroom pedagogy, but into food preparation and feasting together. It's integral to who Loren and his family are, the feasting element. In addition to all this, Loren and Mary Ruth are considered significant mentors even foster godparents, I don't think is a stretch of a term, by many Christians around the globe involved in the environmental movement, in creation care. It is impossible to be a student, a neighbor, a friend of the Wilkinsons and not be challenged to think more deeply about what it means to live Christianly in this world, not only with our intellect, but in how we relate with the world around us, with humans, but also with all else that inhabits the cosmos in which we walk and work and breathe and play. Loren and Mary Ruth have lived for many years now on a small farm on a beautiful small cove in the Gulf Islands of British Columbia, a place well beloved by their children and grandchildren, as well as many of their colleagues and students. Between emails with me yesterday, Loren was busy battling invasive blackberries and pruning grapevines. He lives what he teaches. And before he heads off on the ferry today, just to give you a sense of his busy life, he is kindly gathering with us to talk about some of his journeying with various Inklings and kindreds, and how some of that imagination and integration has led to his most recent publication, a book described by many scholars internationally as very significant. I think that that phrase, that rephrase itself is significant, that many academics and practitioners around the world are pretty excited, very excited about this book. Circles in the Cross, Cosmos, Consciousness, Christ, and the Human Place in Creation. And anywhere that sells books, you can find this or order this. Okay, I'm done, Loren. I know you love that part, don't you? So thank you
You know,
so much for being here with us today. Um, Loren, can I like to go back and give people a sense of who is with us, that you're not just a repository of knowledge, nor just a puller of blackberries and a pruner of grapevines. Um, so could we start with having you tell us a little bit about where you grew up? What took you halfway across the continent from where you grew up to Wheaton College? Many people here are familiar with Wheaton College and the Wade Center, the Center of Inkling Studies. What took you all the way over there for university, and how your introduction to the Inklings wove into that? I'm going to sort of set you free with that sort of wider question and maybe pull some things out.
well, I was born on a riverfront farm in Oregon, which in some ways was kind of at the edge of the frontier. Our job was to farm, but also it was to cut down virgin forest and make a farm out of it. And that was sort of my background, my past. I'm a farmer and a logger in background. Um,
Mhm.
but and I born in a into a Christian family, but I had um, from the very beginning a deep sense that of two sources of truth to me. One was what I knew was true from Sunday school and my family, uh, just the basic Christian story. I absorbed that.
Mhm.
I never left it. But the other was what I picked up in just wandering through the forest and along the river. I knew that this too was the source of truth, but I never had a way of putting them together. Um, and I assumed that Christianity was about becoming a Christian so you wouldn't go to hell, you go to heaven when you died. And so my task was I figured if when I grew up I'd be a missionary, tell other people I'm going to be a foreign missionary, and uh, and I was influenced by a biography of Jim Elliot, who was one of the who lost his life in a martyrdom in South America, and he went to Wheaton College, and I had that's the only I none of my family ever went to college,
Mhm.
but I was a finalist in a merit scholarship contest, and I had to indicate what college I would go to if I won this award. And the only college I even knew about was Wheaton College. So that very unprofound reason is why I went to Wheaton. I had
Yes.
not left Wheaton's in Illinois. I had not left the state of Oregon until I went to college. I was a very, very local person. But at college, my world expanded dramatically. And one of the ways it expanded is I began to learn about the Inklings. I knew a little bit about C.S. Lewis. I had a journalism teacher in high school who not a Christian believer, but he knew I was a reader. He handed me a book called Screwtape Letters. It is interesting. You might like it. It's sort of a devil's eye view of what you believe. And I read it and was impressed. And then I was systematically going through all the science fiction books in our local library, and I came
Okay.
across Out of the Silent Planet, and I thought this sounds almost Christian, but I didn't really expect. I was just reading it as a science fiction book,
Uh-huh.
and then when I went to Wheaton, I very quickly came under the influence of a very great teacher, Dr. Clyde Kilby. Now that name should be familiar to many of you. He is the one who actually began the Wade Center. Um, I and he I took a course in romantic poetry, romantic literature with him, very taken by him. Um, about that same time, I met who was Mary Ruth, who was to be my wife. One of the courses we took together was a seminar on mainly Lewis, but all of the Inklings, really, in Dr. Kilby's living room. And that discussion around food, I think, shaped our idea of what education could be. So Kilby opened the door to me to I heard about Williams, I heard about Tolkien, I heard about Sayers in Kilby's. I think that course that he was teaching, I'm sure, was probably the first course in the Inklings ever taught anywhere. And I could rattle on. I think you need to break in with questions and direct me a little bit.
Oh, yeah, all the rattling is so interesting. I do want people to hear a story that I heard when I was very young about you. That, I mean, I was sort of told almost more than Clyde Kilby, Loren Wilkinson was responsible for at least the presence of Tolkien at Wheaton College. Can you explain the story so that the facts are correct as to why I was told that
Well,
when you were an undergrad?
I discovered Tolkien when I was, I don't know, maybe a second or third year student through Kilby. I I read The Hobbit, and I remember in about the third page the song about the dwarfs far over the misty mountains old to caverns deep where deep things sleep, and I realized this is something very strong here. And then I got the first copy of there was a copy of The Lord of the Rings in the library. It was not well known. Nobody knew about Tolkien, but there was a copy. I got the first issue, the first book. I read it, and you know where the Lord of the Rings ends. I mean, it's terrible. The orcs have attached
Pardon
salmon.
me, the fellowship.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I couldn't go any further because all the other copies were out. That I was on the track team, and that was when the track um, when we took a spring trip. First thing I did is jump out of the library, jump out of the bus, head to the university library where we had a track team, and try to find another copy of The Lord of the Rings. Nobody had it. I noticed that Tolkien was right next to Tolstoy in the card catalog, and there were several books by the one book that they had by Tolkien was Tolkien Beowulf, the monster and the critics, but then
Monsters and the Critics.
nobody had the Lord of the Rings, and it was very hard to get the books. You couldn't buy them in a bookstore. There was this, and I finally got back and got the rest of the book and finished the story. Was so taken by it, just swept off my feet by it, really. And but you couldn't get the copies, and I was telling everybody about it, but the only way I could get them to read it was to order myself. I think I ended up ordering 18 copies, 18 sets of The Lord of the Rings from Blackwell's in Oxford, and gave them or sold them to various people, one of whom was Kirsten's father, who was a classmate of mine. And that's how Tolkien made it into the Jeffries family.
And became an integral part. So thank you, Loren. Very much. Thank you for telling that story. I think it's such a wonderful story and laid so much foundation for the rest of both of our lives. And I think I should interject here that I remember very early on being almost jealous when Lauren's children, when Heidi and Eric told me how amazing you were at reading all the accents for Lord of the Rings when you read it aloud to the family. That has always stayed in my head. But when you were talking about Dr. Kilby, Clyde Kilby, you mentioned the class on romanticism. And when I was an undergrad, it seemed like most Christian academics I knew only spoke of romanticism pejoratively. It was only a negative word in my early years in studying literature amongst the Christians I knew who were academics. And yeah, I would say there's been a significant shift in that perspective over the past couple decades. Do you have any thoughts on why there seemed to be sort of this romanticism was seen as a dark thing, a negative thing? Your own response was different, clearly. So why is that? And maybe why the shift?
Well, I talk about this quite a bit in my book. Um, I I responded to the romantic as to romantic poetry even before I went to college. I read especially Keats and Shelley and was tremendously moved by them because they spoke to what I felt myself. I said I had two sources of inspiration in my life, and one was the Christian story, the other was the created world, and somehow that their writing touched me in that way. Um, but I think you're quite right. Still, romantic is usually prefaced by an adjective like adolescent or adolescent romanticism or naive romanticism or simplistic romanticism or something like that. And I do try to talk about that a bit in the book. Um, our culture has been um, shaped by a by science, um, by the attempt to build a culture on a certain understanding of science, and we call that culture the Enlightenment. And the 18th century is sort of the heyday of Enlightenment, and it said in effect if we can understand the world in terms of law-like behavior, the planets, maybe we can understand ourselves that way. Maybe we are simply machines. And so the Enlightenment world tried to make rules, view tried to make rules um, for organizing human life, organizing human society. And we owe a tremendous amount to the Enlightenment. I'm not knocking the Enlightenment, except it left a lot of things out. And one of the things it left out, or some of the things it left out, are the imagination, feelings, love, empathy. Um, and the Romantics said they weren't saying no to the Enlightenment. They were saying there's a lot more to being human than being a rational creature. And yet our culture still assumes that rationality is the most important part of being human, and therefore anything that questions rationality is suspicious. And the Romantics began to, again, not question rationality so much as recognize that it's maybe not the most important thing. And here I have to mention a writer who has had quite an influence on me and has written a blurb on my book and read the book carefully as I was writing it, and that's the British uh, psychologist, but also literary scholar, Ian McGilchrist. And Ian McGilchrist makes a strong case that we really do have two brains, two parts of ourselves. One part is very good at reducing things to stuff that we can use. It's good at analysis, and it's essential. It's not wicked. It's essential, but it's not the most important part. The other part is open to the world, open to the wonder of the world, and and that is that should be the master. But in fact, since the Enlightenment, the master has been the reductive part, and we need to shift things so that the part that's open to wonder is the master, and that's where I think these writers are so important. But to get back to your question of why maybe romanticism is not so looked down on as it was a few years ago, is that we're seeing more and more the limitations of a strictly reductive, analytic Enlightenment view. We're recognizing as a culture, as a world, that we live, as I say at the introduction of my book, we live in the center of a miracle, and we can't explain that miracle. That miracle, it's a double miracle. One is the fact that there's a universe, that there's something and not nothing, and the other is the fact that we're aware of it, that we're conscious of it. So cosmos and consciousness, as I say in the title of my book, are the two great miracles that we're relearning. That picture of the Earth from space back in 1968, I think, turned the picture of the planet into a kind of icon. You can't live on the Earth without a sense of gift and wonder. And so that doesn't say no to science, but it opens up wonder. And again, these writers are very important for that.
Can you speak a little more into that, how some of the Inklings that you came across along the way expand, and the kindreds, like Hopkins and Wordsworth and Coleridge, how they expanded your understanding of imagination, maybe your understanding of wonder as well?
I spent a couple hours this morning just picking up some books that had influenced me a lot
One or
over the
two.
years. Very, very worn books, and
Beautiful.
you'll see.
Excellent.
Yeah. You know, I guess, and I realized my danger here is I'm going to pick quotes and I'm going to start reading quotes, and that I mustn't do that really. But these, I remember Lewis's Screwtape Letters, which is not, perhaps not his greatest book, but it's one of his earliest, one of his wisest, I think. He tells the senior devil, who is writing advice to a junior devil, says what you need to do is and who is assigned to the temptation of the story. You need to make your patient afraid of the same old thing. You need to make them aware. You need to make them tired of sunrise this morning, flowers this spring, the same old thing again and again and again. And I realized, what the Romantics did is make you aware that the same old thing is itself a miracle. It's marvelous. As I mentioned at the beginning, and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, in a way, transformed the imagination of a whole culture. As it did become available in paperback and sort of took the world by storm in the late 60s and 70s, it became a kind of a way of, well, I think Lewis says this and Tolkien says it, to experience an enchanted forest, like a place like Narnia, or the wonder of Perelandra, or in particular in Tolkien, a place like Lothlorien, or to walk in an enchanted wood means that when you walk in a real wood, it becomes enchanted. It gives you back what is base. It makes you aware of the miracle of the created world. And these writers are very good at that. The I want to talk about Barfield a little bit because Barfield, I think, spelled out what was going on here in a way that I think is very helpful. I ended up doing part of my doctoral dissertation, a major part of my doctoral dissertation on Barfield, and I part company with Barfield on some things. I don't share his admiration for Rudolf Steiner and for anthroposophy. But the basic idea of Barfield that I think is so crucial is that there has been, as you look at least Western culture, there's been a kind of, he calls it the evolution of consciousness. And to summarize it, and this is oversimplifying, as you look at language, as you look at human history, you find a time when we were much more a part of the natural world, which we saw as sacred. One of my favorite quotes from Lewis, which I should have found, is at the beginning, everything was sacred. Every tree was a nymph. Every planet a god. And gradually, the advance of rationality empties this world, drains this world, and they become simply things for us to look at. All of the meaning gets concentrated into us, and this, Barfield says, is a process of what he calls his first view original participation. We share the magic of the world. We're not looking at it; we're a part of it, and gradually we look at it and turn it into something to manipulate. As we develop, we increasingly see the world as simply stuff, as raw material. And the high point or the low point of that development, he would say, is probably in the Enlightenment era. Someone like Descartes, the philosopher, who says there's really only two things: there's mind and matter, and mind exists only in us. The world is there for us to use. But the positive side of that is a tremendous increase in the power and the nature of human self-consciousness. We become more and more able to understand the world, as science gives us that understanding. And the great thing about Barfield is that he doesn't see that as necessarily a bad thing, but he sees it as a step towards what he calls final participation, which is to take that self-conscious sense of otherness from the world and, in a sense, re-inhabit the world. To enter the world again through imagination. And one of, I don't think it's by any means his best book, but I think the title is very significant. Romanticism Comes of Age. In some ways, the point of Romanticism is to the very self-consciousness which has separated the world, us from the world, becomes a way of helping us to rejoin the world, to re-enter the world imaginatively. And Coleridge talked about imagination as the repetition in the finite mind of the infinite I am of the creator. Tolkien picked that idea when he talked about we make still by the law in which we're made. We are sub-creators. And an important transition there was the person who influenced MacDonald, who was influenced by Coleridge. Coleridge was influenced by MacDonald. A lot of Coleridge's, MacDonald's thought on the imagination has its roots back in Coleridge. And of course, you know the importance of MacDonald for Lewis. So there's a whole complicated legacy here of recovering the power of the imagination to now self-consciously participate in the wonder that perhaps earlier human beings understood self-consciously. That's complicated, but I think it's an important idea. and one of the reasons why Barfield is so important to me. However, let me add here. This was my doctoral dissertation. I found the same idea in a thinker that might surprise you, Martin Heidegger, whose later thought says that the nature of human beings is to simply create a space in which what is can appear. And the very word for truth, aletheia, is unconcealment. And that's I think a basically Christian idea. You let things be in the space of your own selfhood. But I didn't have a way of connecting that to profoundly Christian thought. It was done in Tolkien and Lewis. Barfield sort of outlined it. In fact, one of my favorite phrases from Barfield is says that there will be a revival of Christianity in the West only when it's impossible to write a book of science without referring to the incarnation of the Word. I don't have time to spell that out. But where I found the greatest help in bringing Christ into this picture is Gerard Manley Hopkins, and we don't have time to talk about that. He's not one of the Inklings, and they didn't know him or talk about him at all. His work really wasn't influential in England at that time. But I think his vision is a kindred spirit, as you might say. I need to stop.
No, well, I'm going to pop into the chat because I had it lined up because this is a shared love of ours. Could you give just a little bit around why Hopkins fleshes out some of those ideas in the Inklings? I think it leads us well into looking at some of where you went with your book, etc.
Yeah. Now, did you say that there is that poem is Kingfisher's Catchfire?
Yeah, I've just put it in the chat so everybody can see it.
The best known poem is Hopkins is probably a Pied Beauty. Glory be to God for dappled things, skies of couple colors of wind-girded cow, rose moles all in stipple of a trout that swim, or God's grandeur. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. There's deep sense of the variety of the world, but that this is all a gift from God. But where do we stand in that? One of his less well-known poems, Ribblesdale, talks about a place in the in England that he says it need in that poem. He says, "What is earth's eye, heart else? Where else but in dear and dogged man?" He says to the valley, "You can only be. You do a good job of that, but you can only be." We, on the other hand, can enter into you as and feel with you. Now, the poem that I think you have in the chat, Kingfishers Catch Fire. One of the things he does there is, as kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame, as tumble to rim over rim and roundy well, stones ring. Each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung, flings out broad to say its name. I'm not quoting it quite right. Myself it speaks and spells. What I do is me, for that I came. Everything in creation is itself. It's unique, and it declares what it is. We're that way too, but that's the first 8 lines of the sonnet. But then that takes an important turn in the 6th line. I say more. The just man justices, and he takes that. He makes a verb out of the word justice, and by justice he means a person who acts in Christ's eye, how does it go? In Christ's eye, what he is,
Yeah,
Christ,
keep grace that keeps all
love.
his goings graces, acts in God's eyes, what in God's eyes
In
he
God's,
is. Christ.
we can act as Christ, and acting as Christ, we too create a space in which we can become the heart of the natural world. We can become the heart of each other. We can create a space in which things and people appear as what they are.
Mm,
That's a basically a Christian idea.
mhm,
By emptying ourselves, and here we introduce that word kenosis,
mm,
we can let things be, and so um, Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. That's the task of the human being. Now,
mhm,
this is a parallel development for me with the Inklings, but I see them demonstrating this kind of a vision very much, and it is, I think, uh, I have Hopkins in my head right now because going a week from today. I'm going down to Nashville to the Rabbit Room, which some of you know, and at an arts conference down there talking, especially about the important what Hopkins has done. Um, but it it was the Inklings, it was Lewis that kind of prepared me to ask these questions.
mm, mm. No, that's really beautiful. And Hopkins is, without question, a kindred spirit with Inklings. So I think it's very apropos to have discussion around him here. And I'd love to see us dive deeper into Hopkins in the future. Um, I think where to take us from here. I was struck in listening to you before talking about how your understanding of things like kenosis and of the Trinity continued to grow and refine after you arrived as a professor at Regent College. I think it's so easy for some of us to assume that once somebody's a professor, they have all their key understandings fully worked out. They know what they know, and that's all, and that's where they are forever. But it's been really beautiful for me to hear you talking about how you've continued to grow in your understanding of things. And when you arrived at Regent, learning from your colleagues and in discussions and readings. Um, and I think that whole concept really, in a lot of ways, is integral to your book, Circles on the Cross. But can you explain how your understanding of Trinitarian theology has continued to deepen over time? And if you want to interweave that with kenosis, you can, or we can come back to that word.
Well, like like many Christians, the Trinity was something I believed, but I didn't
Mhm.
really think about it much and didn't understand it. Um, one of the gifts of being at Regent and one of the embarrassments of being a professor of interdisciplinary studies is that it has no content. Somebody has said um, the average academic uh, specialist knows more and more about less and less until he knows almost everything about practically nothing. On the other hand, an interdisciplinary studies professor um, knows less and less about more and more until he knows practically nothing about almost everything. And that's sort of the frame that's what I that was what I faced when I came to Regent. People ask, "What do you teach?" Well, my task there, see, Regent is a graduate school of people from different backgrounds,
Mhm.
different professional training, teachers, doctors, lawyers, who come to bring their their Christian knowledge up to the level of their other professional knowledge. And my enviable and unenviable task was to help them do that.
Mhm.
And so I had to share, I had to learn from my students all the time. Uh, but the professionals at Regent, people like Jim Houston, Jim Packer, uh, um, Gordon Fee, biblical scholars, visitors, uh, people ranging from John Polkinghorne to James Allen, and Thomas Torrance, all of that, Colin Gunton, all of these were people that that were visiting scholars, and I got to know, and I gradually realized from them um, how much I didn't know. And one of the things that they helped me see is a much richer picture of the nature of God, that God is um, is a community, that God is a relationship. Um, Actually, one of these professors recently, George Guthrie, who's in England now, um, had a student, I believe he was from South Africa, uh, who pointed out to him, I think he was a convert from into Christianity, pointed out to him the significance of the wording of the prologue to John's Gospel. We all know it, and it's crucial to my thinking. In the beginning was the Word, and of course that link that goes back to the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. In the beginning was the Word, and it links that word to creation. But we often pass over the very precise way in which John um, talks about the relationship of the Word to God. Um, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's significant that he says with God before he says was God. The relationship of the Word to God is more basic to the being than the very being of God. That relationality is central to who God is. And so gradually at Regent, I began to learn this from various folks, Jim Houston in particular, um, Jim Packer, many of these visiting people I met, who helped me understand the that God is in a sense a community. And then one of the ways that it's come very vividly brought home to me is, well, it's caught visually in that great Rublev icon of three figures, Orthodox icon. Do you have a picture of it there handy?
Yeah, this is a faded version, sadly, but
Oh,
people
yeah.
will recognize what you're talking about.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's three figures sitting around a table. Leave it there. That's great. And historically, biblically, this is the three visitors to Abraham, telling him he's going to have a son. But of course, Rublev, when he painted this in the 15th century, also saw it as an image of the Trinity. And the interesting thing about it is, to begin with, it's a four-sided table, but the side facing us is empty. And the perspective is reversed. Normally, the vanishing point of perspective is at the back. But the vanishing point is where we are. And so the widening lines of the picture pull us into the place at the table. And of course, the place at the table is also food, suggesting communion. And it's clear that what this image does is what God does, what the triune God does, invite us into a place at the table, invite us into the relationship, invite us into the Trinity, and through us, the whole creation. So it's and then while we're at the table, increasingly, as Kirsten mentioned, we've had we've taught at our home and have people seated around a table, and often we sing beginning of a blessing at the beginning of a meal. Sometimes it's simply very simple, like the doxology, praise God from whom all blessing flow. And people did look at each other in astonishment afterwards. They didn't realize they were a choir. People in a circle can sing together beautifully, they harmonize naturally. And I think it was Jeremy Begbie who said, one of the reasons we have a hard time visualizing the Trinity is we think of it spatially, but if we think of it aurally, we can easily think of sounds together in harmony. So it's no accident that Christians sing so much together, because that's a great picture of the Trinity. So all of these things are things that I think I've learned, began to learn in my time at Regent, from colleagues and from students, and especially just from teaching and being with students. And one of the students was an artist from Australia who painted the picture behind me, and you can see it. It's a large 9x3 triptych. Um, the It's in the cover on the cover of my book, and it's a bit mysterious, I think. I don't think people quite understand it. You can go to the around page 315 in the book and get a discussion of it. But the figure on the right is the round figure is actually the island that I'm looking that I can see out the window. I don't know whether I can see this or not. It's pretty dim. Retreat Island. The figure in the left and the figure in the center is the same island, clear cut, logged. That's not all it is, of course. The figure on the left over here on the other side is a lake up in the mountains, and the mountains are visible in the painting, draining into the ocean. It's also an empty tomb, and of course the figure behind my head is also it's not only the island clear cut, but it's the head of Christ on the cross, and the outstretched arms become the outline, the horizon line of the hills across the way. And so what this picture does, it was painted by an Australian artist who came to Regent to paint and think about landscape painting and its relationship to faith, is that it shows Christ involved in the various struggles of our way of being in creation. It's in dialogue with a famous painting by Salvador Dali that also looks down on Christ on the cross. But in that painting, the Christ of St. John of the Cross, it's called, Christ is suspended above the earth. In this painting, Christ embraces the earth. Well, this painter, Lindsay Farrell, who's since died, said it's unusual that a painting can change a person's life, and it did kind of change his life. He went back to Australia and started leading pilgrimages, showing, in a sense, through his painting and his vision, Christ in the landscape.
Wow.
And so, but I mention this simply to point out how richly I've learned from my students over the years.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And Loren, that walks us well. And I'm just going to hold up here so people can see the painting behind you in light of the cover of the book and see that. You've said that what kenosis implies for creator, cosmos, consciousness is really the central question that you're seeking to grapple with in the book or explore in the book. Kenosis is a word that many people won't know. I had never heard the word before I was a graduate student in theology. Um, can you explain a little bit more of that? And I mean, you can, if it comes to your brain, pull in if any inkling reading in your past has helped you to understand that better. Great. If that's not in your head at the moment, that's fine. But just help us understand more deeply. And I think the picture is such a beautiful example to have that behind you as you continue to explain what kenosis is.
Well, kenosis is simply the Greek word that appears in Philippians 2, where Paul writes that Jesus, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but emptied himself. The word kenosis simply means emptying, self-emptying. And that idea of self-emptying, I think, is basic to who God is. God is God the Father giving away himself to the Son giving away himself, giving everything back to the Father, the Spirit um, pointing away from himself to the Son. This circle of self-giving, and that idea, of course, and it goes back to this idea of that I was trying to illustrate from Hopkins. We have our tendency is to simply to expand ourselves, to be ourselves, but we can also use our selfhood as a way of letting other selves be. And the supreme example of that God's self-giving is clearly the cross. It's quite clear from the whole New Testament that our clearest picture of God, the creator of the universe, is what we see in Christ. And the clearest picture of the nature of Christ is his self-giving on the cross. And so if that shows us the nature of God, it also shows us something of the nature of the creator, that God's risky experiment of creation is can be understood as a kind of self-giving. And it struck me, I remembered a cryptic passage at the very end of one of my favorite, what, perhaps the greatest Lewis book. It's hard to pick a great one, the greatest. Remember, Ransom has struggled, has conquered the unman. He meets Tor and Tinidril, these figures of kind of redeemed, unfallen, perfect humanity, and he's just about ready to leave. They put him back in the kind of coffin-like thing that he's going to be transported back to Earth in, and he has an injury from his struggle with the unman. He's still bleeding from it, and actually, before that struggle, remember, he hears a voice saying, "Oh, you're going to have to physically fight this creature, and you may not survive." But the voice says, "Remember, my name also is Ransom." And of course, the character is named Ransom. That's just coincidence, and yet, and he has this wound that is bleeding. There is a red dew coming up out of your foot, like a little spring," says the woman. Ransom looked down and saw that his heel was still bleeding. "Yes," he said, "it's where the evil one bit me. The redness is of true blood." "Sit down, friend," said Tor, "and let me wash your foot in this pool." Ransom hesitated, but the king compelled him. So presently he sat on the little bank, and the king kneeled before him in the shallow water and took the injured foot in his hand. He paused, and as he looked at it, "So this is true," he said. "I've never seen such a fluid before." This is the line. "And this is the substance wherewith Mal-el-Dil remade the worlds before any world was made." Mal-el-Dil, of course, is the name for God, the creator. But what Lewis is saying here is that before creation, the blood of Christ was involved in the making of the world. That creation was a great good, but it also was a great and ultimately costly gift. And an idea that I think I learned first of all most explicitly from Charles Williams, but I think it's implicit in the others, is that the incarnation is not just plan B for fallen creation. It's in God's purpose from the beginning. Now, this is Lewis waffles on this. Sometimes he talks as though it is that the incarnation was required by human sin. But this passage suggests that in some ways God made himself vulnerable at the very beginning of creation, and that in this sense, um, uh, God is we see the presence of God in creation in the cross, but the cross is basic to creation. And that's the significance of the title of my book, Circles on the Cross, that at the center of these uh, circles of cosmos and of our consciousness is the self-giving love of God, which we can call kenosis. And we see it all through the natural world. We see self-giving as basic to life. We also see self-giving as basic to human life, human love. And this is no accident because we are created in the image of a self-giver. And there's so much more we could say here. Again, linking back to the Inklings. This costly gift of life is basic to so many fairy stories. And Tolkien, in his essay on fairy stories, at the very end, writes an epilogue, and he says, "Oh, I think I will read it again. It's we have the time. Hang on a second.
Cool.
My book fell on the floor. I gotta pick it up.
Make me feel better about having failed to turn on the correct switch in my old
I also want to
farmhouse.
talk a little bit about Pilgrim's Regress, which I think is Lewis's perhaps his wisest and most neglected book. It has a lot to say about what we're talking about. But this Tolkien essay, at the end of an essay on fairy stories, which, of course, MacDonald was a great father of English fairy stories in a lot of ways. Um, um, Tolkien writes, the Gospels contain a fairy story, or a story of a larger kind which embraces all the essence of fairy stories. But this story has entered history and the primary world. And then finally he says, the Christian joy, the Gloria, is a great eucatastrophe, a great turning to the good. Art has been verified. This story is supreme and it's true. God is the Lord of angels and of men and of elves. Legend and history have met and fused. Well, the center of that story is the self-giving of God in the incarnation. I want to have a chance to talk a little bit about the Pilgrim's Regress and the idea of paganism, which was an important idea for Lewis. And like Romanticism, he sees it in a positive way and not a negative way. But should we stop and look at questions and other?
No. We've got we're getting close to 1:15, but I'm not sure if you're pulling this into regress, so I'll throw it at you, and we'll take just a couple minutes, because I'd love to, as we move into shifting over to questions from others, just highlight the fact that you're talking about a lot of beauty and hope, goodness and truth. And we live in really complicated times today. We're all aware, and it's times where it seems like both intellectual and cultural hostility is on the rise. Environmental destruction is increasing. Many of us here not just watch war, but a number of us here live in the midst of war. There's an increasing, I would say, miasma of polemic opinions. And yet you end your book with a call to hope, a vision of hope. And yeah, you've got regress in your hand. What are the different ways that Lewis and others have helped equip us for not just having hope, but nurturing it and sharing it. Like how do we integrate imagination into what can become hope?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind, a reason why I end the book with hope. I also end the book by talking about Easter and the resurrection. Um, I I think of G.K. Chesterton, who's another kindred spirit, and we haven't mentioned yet, but I think you include him in this circle in some ways, don't you?
Mhm.
Uh, in Chesterton's book, The Everlasting Man, he talks about um, the people coming to the tomb on the Easter morning on the significantly eighth day of creation. That is Sunday, the day after the Sabbath. And that eighth day is significant. It's beginning a new creation. Um, they go while it was yet dark. John points this out, while it was yet dark. Um,
Hmm.
and and then they Mary, as you know, finds the tomb. The others leave, uh, and and then Jesus calls her name. Um, and as um, I didn't bring this quote, but Chesterton says basically, um, um, they didn't realize that the old world had died in the night. They were beginning at the first day of a new creation, the first day of the week. If the week of creation um, is um, is the first 7 days, this is a new creation, and uh, Chesterton says, in the semblance of a gardener, God walked again in the garden, pointing out that highly significant mistake that Mary Magdalene made, saying, she thought he was the gardener. Well, she was not wrong. He
Hmm.
was the gardener. And in a sense, he is giving us back the basic human task, which is to be gardeners of creation. But he does it on the first day of the week, the first day of a new creation. And I think that's the reason I have hope, that we do know how the story will end.
Hmm.
There are the creation has begun; it will continue. There are dark points, but I don't think we have hope. And I'll
We are in the same story
leave there.
still, says Sam.
The same story. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Frodos. I have been given permission for the first question to be, please tell us what you're going to say about Pilgrim's Regress.
Well, there it's a complicated book, and it needs to be read. It's hard because it's written very much to the intellectual milieu of when Lewis became a Christian. It parallels the story he tells in Surprised by Joy about his becoming a Christian. Uh, but it describes a journey of a pilgrim looking for something, a glimpse of for him it's an island in the distance, and he wants it. It becomes actually a glimpse of what he wants is a relationship with God for the pilgrim. But he, he, the road runs east-west. He's headed uh, to the east. Um, North of the road are the errors of what McGilchrist would probably call the left brain errors, the errors of excessive rationalization and reductionism. On
Mm,
the on the right of the road, are the errors of um, too much feeling, too much imagination without the benefit of reason, feeling without the benefit of reason. And so he wanders off right of the road, left of the road, and right of the road, makes various mistakes, um, and comes to a kind of crisis, a great canyon he has to cross, And in a night of storm, and this is a part that I think is particularly significant, he stumbles on a cave of a person called History, an old man called History, and History tells the story of this country and this landscape, and one of the stories he tells is that the people um, oh, this is so complicated to do. Essentially, what he argues is that um, um, people are given pictures. God, the creator, gives them pictures to follow. And the pictures, if they follow rightly, will lead them to him. Um, and it was Charles Williams, I think, who said that anything loved for its own sake will become for the beloved an image of God. And one of the pictures uh, that was given is simply in the Romantic period a picture of the world around them. The
Mm.
world around them became imbued with divinity in a sense, and you find that in
Charged with the
Wordsworth.
grandeur.
Yeah, but whether they recognize it or not, following that led them eventually, and somebody like Hopkins led uh, someone like Wordsworth with the same kind of sensitivity to a knowledge of God. But this is this is the thing that I think is so important, and I wanted to stress. Um, um, and what people often uh, criticize me and others who talk about Christ in creation for is, doesn't that sound like paganism? Aren't you sort of
Mm.
merging God and creation? Well, no, no, not really. But the pagans have have it right in one sense. They are glimpsing, uh, as much of our culture and even much of our Christian culture has not glimpsed the reality of the presence of God in the created world. It is a
Mm.
gift, and and one of the things the pagans get right is that this is a mysterious and divine gift. And um, Lewis's work is full of paganism, as you know. The Narnia world takes the all kinds of pagan imagery and puts it in a and baptizes it. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, Lewis often spoke of himself as feeling like he was a converted pagan living among apostate Christians, and uh,
Mm.
and the figure of history um, in Pilgrim's Weekend. Let me just read a little bit from what history tells him. Um, um, that's the definition of a pagan. A man so traveling that if all goes well, he arrives at Mother Kirk's chair, which is the church, and is carried over this gorge. Um, the trouble is about pagans is that the perfect, and in that sense, typical pagan is so uncommon there. But I think much of what we call the New Age movement, much of what's in the environmental movement, is groping towards a kind of paganism. Sometimes it's called neo-paganism, which I think we have to be very critical and very careful of. On the other hand, they are seeing an important truth: is that we do live in the middle of a miracle.
Mm.
Um, we live in a divine gift, and our task, I think, as Christians, is to point them to the um, the giver of that gift, and there's no better help than these writers. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's really cool, Lauren. One of the questions here, somebody wants to bring us back to part of the conversation early on and to Heidegger, and just to ask you to parse out a little bit better. Now, this is perhaps appropriate following what you've just said. Um, you said that Heidegger left as he gets older, and yet this person, points out that in Der Spiegel he says, only a God can save us, but within this person says, but yet there is no redemption. Now, can you explain a little more what you see as the shift in Heidegger?
Well, I don't think Heidegger ever completely was clear on on what he was saying there.
Mhm.
But a couple of details which I mentioned in a footnote in my book. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to be very critical of Heidegger, his support of Nazism,
Mhm.
which was never very clearly repented. Um, um, but a few months before his death, he called a colleague, a friend of his from when he was a boy, who was a Christian priest, and said, "I want to have a Christian funeral. I want to be buried in the churchyard." Um, Another friend who went walking with him often noticed that um, whenever they passed a little shrine on the path, Christian shrine, Heidegger would cross himself. And
Mhm.
I don't think he ever understood all of this. The and I'm not I'm not saying I guess what I'm suggesting is from the very beginning of Heidegger's work, from even being in time, he describes human being as his word in being in time is Dasein, being there. Um, it's the it's we and in Heidegger in being in time, that's presented as a source of angst. And so the existentialists drew a lot, people like Sartre drew on Heidegger to develop a very negative thought. But as Heidegger develops that his thought later in his later work, that space of being becomes um, a space in which um, things can appear for what they are. Um, they We use our human worlds to let the earth be an earth. And he describes this quite eloquently, but again, not in a clearly, explicitly Christian way. That's why I find um, Hopkins' idea of giving a self, humans
Mhm.
um, justicing, being Christ, and creating a space that people can, where creatures can speak their own being, is fulfilling the idea that Heidegger is glimpsing.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's
Heidegger
cool.
is a great swamp to try to dive into in a few minutes. So don't think I can say anymore.
No, no, that was very deftly navigated. Thank you. Someone else here is asked, staying in the realm of romanticism. Somebody asked if you're familiar with the work of Stephen Prickett. I think they're probably thinking specifically probably of Religion and Romanticism, which was Prickett's big text on that. I don't know. There are a number of us here who knew Stephen quite well. I don't know if you're familiar with his work or not.
I don't know his work, no,
Yeah, yeah.
and so
Okay.
I can't.
Can't
Uh,
speak to
yeah.
that. Yeah.
By the way, I have to say that Lewis himself was pretty disdainful. Well, although he subtitles, interestingly, the subtitle of Pilgrim's Regress um, is an allegorical apology for Christianity, reason, and Romanticism.
Hmm.
But when he comes to write a preface 10 years later to a reversion of the world, um, he says uh, the world the word means so many things that it um, probably uh, should be abandoned. He doesn't like the word. Um,
Hmm. That's interesting.
but he does then focus on what he sees as what he was trying to talk about as romanticism, and as this sense of longing, this Sehnsucht, sweet desire for something that is beyond. I think it's worth noting that there are a number of contemporary writers and
Hmm.
thinkers who follow the same path in a different way. Um, some of you may know Paul Kingsnorth. The name Kingsnorth. He's a British
Hmm.
writer who went from atheism to Buddhism to environmentalism to uh, neo-paganism. He was a part of a Wicca coven for a while, and is now an Orthodox Christian, Orthodox big O, Eastern Orthodox, because he felt he realized he was on a path, and that path um, pointed to Christianity. And there, I could list several others. I've followed the same path. Not quite sure how I got there, but it what's the question again? Oh, the romanticism, the meaning of
Yeah.
romanticism. Well, it's this following a desire is as Lewis says, I think in Pilgrim's Regress, or maybe it's in Surprised by Joy. Reality rings true wherever you test it, and if you follow these longings out and try to fulfill them in any way except in God, your Creator, who you really long for, you'll find that you need to keep searching. And there are, in these troubled times, a number of thinkers and writers that have moved in that direction. Um, Many of them all the way to Christianity. I think of poets like Denis Levertov, who was not a Christian or agnostic in most of her life, and then realized that the only thing that held it all together that made sense was a Christian story. Um, Romanticism. The question is romanticism. It was Prickett's book, Religion and Romanticism. I don't know what argument he makes, but um, it's not a very helpful term. It's a very slippery and dangerous idea, but it's
Mm.
getting at something that is absolutely essential, and a lot of people are following what we would call a romantic path, straight into a place a place in the table of the Trinity. So.
That's beautiful. I've been asked to squeak in a last question here, and that is if you were to go to a desert island and you're allowed one Inklings book to take with you that would help you dive deeper into the ideas you're exploring here, what would it be? And you're allowed to have a different answer tomorrow. But at the moment, right now, what comes to your mind?
Oh boy. Um, hmm. That's an impossible question.
Is that impossible question?
Let me
You can have a
list
couple. You can have more than one.
let me list a couple. I
Okay,
think
yeah.
one would be Pilgrim's Regress.
Okay.
Another would be his parallel autobiography, Surprised by Joy,
Mm.
um, and probably the whole of the Lord of the Rings as well. So that's not a fair answer, but it's not a fair question. So
It's a good answer. Mm. Loren, thank you so much for this time in the midst of a busy spell in your own life. I know that and so I'm sure, I'm sure I'm not alone here in thinking we could sit here for half the afternoon if we had it. If we only were sitting around the fire at your place overlooking the ocean, being able to ask you more questions. But perhaps we can have you back to explore some more questions today. I know that you made Denise so happy in your conversation of Pilgrim's Regress, which she looked at in her PhD, in her doctoral work. So you've made her, I know, very happy on that. Um, we are going to shift over to sort of more conversational time with Brenton. And Loren, as I said, Loren needs to go catch a ferry at some point in time. So Loren, feel free to stay as long as you can, or if you need to disappear right away, we completely understand. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your heart.
yeah, I'll stick around for a while just to hear
Yeah.
your conversation, but I don't
Okay.
want to answer any more questions.
Okay, you hear that, people? It has been said. And Denise, before we hear your voice and hand us over to Brenton, and I think Denise is going to introduce us to Brenton, I do want to do my part in just flagging for everybody. What I think David also put into the chat, a reminder that um, the C.S. Lewis and Kindred Spirit Society of Eastern and Central Europe is not at all exclusive to persons who live in that part of the world. And indeed, we would love to have your participation in the society and your support of the society. So I'd love to invite you to please consider becoming a member. And you can go to the website on the internet, see more information about that. Um, we don't just have the amazing conference every 2 years at the university in Yash, but also there's a newsletter and there's various events like this online. And we do have need of your financial support as well as just your prayers and your encouragement and your involvement. So do keep the society and the work that is done with Agora Christi in mind. Denise, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Wilkinson, for this amazing conversation. And you said amazing thing about uh, books, authors, but also about Trinity. And I'm in the process of finalizing the translation of the book Participating in God by Professor Paul Fides. And some of the ideas that were presented there were quite new for us, but many resonated in what you have just said today. And it is, I can't wait to come back to the recording to re-listen everything and put down every some of the ideas that you have said. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you'll get to come to Romania. If not this November, maybe next time or with another occasion. We mean to organize more events on C.S. Lewis in between conferences. So you are welcome to come and it will be just great. And we'll have to find ways to make your book available to Romanian public. Also, the recording of a talk with your permission will go to all the ones that have registered. So many have registered, but probably for various reasons were not present today, but they will receive the record and will make it available to the members of the society and also to the ones who are on our list for newsletters. So thank you again, and thank you, Kirsten. And now we turn to you, Brandon. You are like from the house. You can just say a few words about you in a few minutes, and then for the ones who are still here, just challenge us with something in order to participate in the conversation and to connect some more. And thank you
Great.
for being here.
Okay, well,
Please tell
thank you,
me,
Denise.
because I have not received your proposal, tell me that you are coming this November.
I still have 3 days, right? So I have till the 20th.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Can you propose to think of a topic later? Is that an effective conference proposal, or is that it's just a little?
Well, well, just send it and we will receive you with anything, you know.
Oh, excellent. I was actually going to propose to try and plant haskap berries here in honor of Lauren's talk today. I'm not sure how interesting that'll be this coming fall, but next year would look good.
Oh, okay. It's over to you now.
Yeah, well, excellent. No, thank you. That was lovely, everyone. I know, Lauren, you don't want to answer any questions, but I'm going to leave you with a question which you can volunteer to answer, or you can use as sort of a reflective devotional for the rest of your day. Uh, well, how would we re-subtitle The Pilgrim's Regress? So instead of an apology for reason, romanticism, and Christianity, would we want to say reason, something, and Christianity? What would we want to put
Mhm.
there? If romanticism is this slippery,
Yeah,
mercurial
yeah.
term.
Um, I would, I think, want to use a word that pointed to creation. I wouldn't want to I mean, one word that comes to mind is a word which I myself detest, and that's environmentalism. But that's not it. Um, it, but it's that um, the what the world invites us to, longing. Maybe I mean, Lewis himself says he would rather uh, use a word like longing or Sehnsucht
Hmm.
instead of romanticism. But I would want to word, and I don't know that the word, I can't think of the word, a word that somehow relates that longing to what we are given all the time, um, by just being conscious in a cosmos. Um, the fact of being, um, yeah, that, I mean, in a way, that's what my book's about. So I can say an apology for my my book, Circles and a Cross. It's,
So, yeah,
um,
so we'll add that as a subtitle to C.S. Lewis's future,
sure,
the future printings or the next Romanian translation.
right,
Yeah, we'll just have like a footnote with your book there. No, I mean, like you see the challenge we have. Like Jim Prothero, I don't know how to say his name. He calls the Inklings a kind of neo-romanticism movement, and I think that's kind of interesting. But it's still a word that kind of like flows out beyond us, you know. Um,
yeah, it's a very unhelpful word, relating to a particular development of literature and romance, the romance story. And I wish there were a better word. Uh,
yeah.
longing, creation-based longing. How about that? An
Mhm.
apology for creation-based longing,
Creation-based
creation-inspired
longing.
longing.
So
Yeah,
maybe a creation call or something like that. If
yeah.
like it is a subtitle, we don't want to get too long. It's not an academic proposal for Denise's conference in the fall, where we can have super long subtitles, right, Denise? So yeah, no, I appreciate your thoughts. The point wasn't to trap you. I'd written the same things: imagination, wonder, joy, Sehnsucht, longing. Um, and the word Sehnsucht does kind of capture a little bit of what you're saying, but it's not a word that has any meaning for
Yeah.
us outside of C.S. Lewis, right?
Mhm.
That actually let me take, since you've opened it on this, to say one thing in which I think I have uh, distanced myself a bit from Lewis over the
Mm,
years, and that is um, his his pretty explicit Platonism, um,
Mhm.
and um, and what that sometimes, and he's inconsistent in this, but that sometimes boils down to the idea that this world is an imperfect copy of a perfect world. You see it most
mm,
clearly maybe in the at the very end of the last battle, when the the eschaton that they enter is, we discover that that Narnia was just a copy of that
mm,
world, the perfect world, and and I I I think that, I mean, I go back to the very beginning of Surprised by Joy, this little image of the garden that he sees in his the little model that his brother made, um, reminds him of a world that he can never enter. He um, he keeps looking for it, but he never finds it because he's looking for God. And I know what he's saying, except I don't think the problem is that somehow um, we live in a fallen world, but rather we are fallen people living in God's perfect world. Um, the the God's good creation is not something else, not something somewhere else. It's here. This is the fullness of God's creation. There's only one world, not a world of which this is the shadow. And
mm,
sometimes Lewis, I think, can lean a little bit towards that Platonic idea that this is a copy of something more perfect. No, I think this is God's costly gift, and it's the only creation we have. And the new creation is a restoration of it, but it's not a replacement by something better.
Yeah. And a copy is such a thin word. I mean, sorry, I'm being a little literal there. When I think of a copy of, it's a two-dimensional kind of word, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think he's a little closer in The Great Divorce, where you see the temporal reality of the things we make here and the choices we make here have these kind of in and out of eternity kind of consequences. I think that's
Yeah, yeah. That is another great book. I didn't, and I think um, I like the fact that I like the unity of the Great Divorce. It's all one world there in a way, and our
mhm.
problem the problem is with the people who choose not to enter it, like
Yeah.
the dwarves in at the end of the last battle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the I think certainly whatever that word you creation centered calling to the other or to the out, which is also an
Yeah,
in, or whatever that sentence was you said,
yeah,
is yeah.
creation-based longing. Yeah, yeah.
Creation-based longing, that works well. Sorry, Denise, I was supposed to introduce myself. I'm Brenton Dickinson. I'm the curator of a pilgriminarnia.com. I teach some things and write some things, and I would love to hear your questions. So raise your whatever it is, purple or yellow hand, depending on the settings here, and voice them. And it's not just questions. This is comments. This is a time to is it actually called an afterglow, or do I actually just keep calling it that?
You keep calling it that,
I
but
keep
we like
calling it that, yeah. And so just the point is to like today's about integration. So let's integrate. Let's see how these things soak in and go outwards. We'll walk away with different things by energy. I will say, and then I've got two hands. I will say, just as a plug, because I'm introducing myself, I have a book coming out with Oxford Press sometime the end of this year or early next year on C.S. Lewis and the kenosis idea, or the what I call the shape of the cross, the story of the death, burial, resurrection. That whole kind of narrative movement that's in creation, that's in God's reality, as you talked about the community there, Loren. But I really chose not to deal with the Platonism in any. It's meant to be a readable book, and you're right. I kind of set it aside in a sense. So, yeah.
Mm.
We've got Lorna, and then we have Paul. So, Lorna, if I caught you correctly, would you like to ask a question? Yeah. Let's hear your microphone. Make sure we're working.
I started to write it out. So what I've started to say is the sense of joy in the depth of what we have heard today has been a great blessing with tears, is as far as I got while you were talking. So just Loren, thank you for the passion that you have to integrate the beauty of our world with the journey towards the table of the Trinity, with that fourth side being left open for us to come in. You've given some profoundly beautiful perspectives that have been of, I can't even tell you, because it's so pertinent and applicable to where I am right now. In conversation with somebody recently, which I won't go into why it all came about, but this person said, beauty cannot save a soul, and a tree cannot save a soul.
Well,
And it just ripped my heart out. Like, what are we trying to say here? That somehow Christianity is only a metaphysical, spiritual discipline that has no room for this world that God has created. So when I wrote back to this person, I said, maybe a tree cannot bring a person to salvation, but if the person is sitting under the tree, they may think about the one who made it and come to him. So I've spent days mulling over how to answer this person who just hit some really hard statements that broke my heart. And you have given flesh to some of my ponderings in a way bigger and beyond what I could have done on my own. And I'm grateful for your heart. And Hannah Mae Henry is a dear friend, and I hear she's gone to the boat course every time since she took it as a student. Um, there are good things happening, and you are ah, the the prow of the boat that pushes through the water, making way for others to follow. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's lovely. If you have, as a scout, Loren, if you have the instincts of some of the great scouts in Narnia, then like Jill, then that'll be a good thing to take with you. Paul, are you going to talk about the Romanian translation of like Sehnsucht? Because there's a conversation going on here, and folks, if you're going to put in a word like door or creation list, you got to put in etymologies for the rest of us. So, but you can bring up your thought, Paul, whether it's related or not to that.
Yeah, I am not going to do the etymology, um, but door, I think, in the Romanian language is a perfect equivalent to Sehnsucht. It has all these kind of poetic implications of trying to define the indefinable. Um, so my suggestion is that we, especially in the context in which we're discussing, adopt door as the word here and forget all these other things. Romanian obviously is superior in communicating such things, and we ought to recognize this. Um, I have actually, on a serious note, and maybe Loren and some of the others have thought about this, um, thought about at one point trying to make a list of words in languages which can't be translated in other languages. Probably somebody has, there's probably a website that one could go to. Uh, but I think that Lewis makes this fairly clear when he talks about romanticism as, okay, what does it really mean? We're trying to define the indefinable. It's the people grabbing blind people grabbing the elephant, right? Um, like a tree, like a snake, depends on which end you're coming from. Um, and maybe that's good. You know, again, if we, I speak as a more or less scholar. Um, it's good to have things that we actually can't quite get a handle on. Um, because again, I think there are lots of mysteries of the Christian faith that uh, are difficult to get a handle on, and maybe our attempts ought to be just recognized as attempts or perspectives or something like that. I guess that wasn't a question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm still requesting the etymology of door in the chat somewhere, just so we can. So in Japan, we learned wabi sabi, which was a phrase I still haven't been able to capture. And in poetry, there they have quite a number. Their poetry is also movement, like poetry is moving, like there is as in like a gerund moving as in a gerund, and so like it's just a little different. It doesn't translate well.
But
So maybe
doesn't wabi sabi mean something like Zengzut? It's
yeah,
there's an element of sadness and imperfection and
that's right.
longing that's supposed to be there even in a haiku, which I've noticed that before, the
Yeah, it's
similarity.
but there's a um, it's not like it's a beautiful, ugly kind of so bittersweet, like those
Mm.
sorts of things, but not asymmetry, symmetry. So not like opposites. So they come together in some way. So right now, by the way, folks, we're up to about 17, 18 words in the subtitle to the Pilgrim's Regress right now for the next Romanian edition of the Pilgrim's Regress. So we're doing pretty well. Um, I saw their creation lust. I assume that's a Romanian word, and I wouldn't really work in English super well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because we have just discussed this issue of the pain of translating a serious theological book like Participating in God. We had this, so this idea just popped up that actually a panel on translating some of these words in various languages would be just an amazing thing for our conference, especially we have this hope to invite to get to discover scholars from Eastern Europe, uh, countries that we don't usually think about, and try to somehow generate a conversation about all these major terms and to discuss on them, because it is indeed for in Romanian language it is a serious problem how to translate some of these English words who are so meaningful, but we need phrases in Romanian to try to explain them in case we understand what they mean. So we are trying to grasp them. Okay, back to you.
Mm. No, thanks, Denise. And just while we're sort of thinking, I've got a prompt for us to think about to keep things moving, but I do want to get a sense who's here for the first time. We do like to do a bit of a show of hands. So if you can use your little yellow, purple hand thing or whatever, just to let us know. Or are we all kind of in the? It looks like we've got some experienced folks here. Okay, we've got one. Only yellow because of the lighting there, Roger Woods, right? So it's not the no, you don't have the robot hand sticking up there, so that's fine. Yeah. Well, excellent. Thanks, folks. And I do
I'm
suggest,
first.
yeah, yeah. And your first time, that's right. And by the way, Mary Ruth Wilkinson is not the person that has been talking to us for the entire
No,
period. So,
yeah, that's my wife.
yeah, that's right. And I took her books, Children and God class some
Really?
years ago. So yeah. Yeah, and it was a she failed me on a paper, so it was a transformational moment for me. So it was on a poetry reading. And she made me go to the office, and we had to work it through, and it's a lesson I give every student since. Um, I'm far more grateful than my students are for that moment. So, um, oh, so in thinking about this as a way of kind of integration is in the title of this. What is it, folks, that makes trimming blackberry bushes or putting our fingers in soil or re-indigenizing the species of trees in our property or growing a garden, even like not just the seeds to fruit, but like then into the kitchen to the table. What is it about these things that seems to take Lorna's phrase to kind of open that was it the fourth door of 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 God's reality here in our creation? Like I once called it the fourth, the cross breaks the fourth wall of creation,
Mm.
allows us to see from outside without losing the inside. It's a kind of a movie term. So, what is it about those sorts of activities that allow us to feel or it feels not the word I want, know, participate in the things that we've been talking about here? And there's one quotation, I just want to give it. Um, uh, uh, to experience that the blood of Christ that was involved in the making of the world, as Loren put it. So why? What is it about those things? What
I
is it
have to
for you?
leave.
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
to leave, but I do want to answer in a sense. I think those things remind us that we are bodies. We don't have bodies. We are bodies. And those bodily activities are so important because we're not just bodies. We're unity. I have to go. So it's
yeah.
been
And
wonderful to be
and
here.
and if anyone goes to Regent and Loren gives the orientation, he says that in his first orientation. It was for me the first day I was ever there. So This is the world, and we have bodies, right? And so it begins. Thank you very much, Loren. What
Okay.
else? What is it for you, folks, that embodies the kinds of things that we're talking about? Uh, the echoes of the Trinity in everyday creation.
This is Jean Michelson, and I just heard a talk on Gnosticism. And I think the physical world was the whole idea of its worth, was what Satan attacked the early church with, was Gnosticism. The physical was evil or not worth anything. And the lady that said a tree never saved anybody. But I think God uses the physical world all the time to reach people, especially people who are blocking out other people. I think they are reached through the physical world that they come in contact with, whether it's a sunrise or sunset or birds. God reaches people when other people won't work. So I think that is early on how Satan attacked the church. And the Apostle John was writing against that because it was a problem for Ephesus. So I think it's important that we value as Christians God's creation.
Thank you, Jean. And is this just too on the nose to what Lorna was saying? Like, when did a tree ever save anybody? Is it not hard to see the links between, the tree in the Garden of Eden, the tree upon which Christ died, and then the living tree that becomes, the center of our new creation? Like, is that like
Well,
just
that's
kind of
what I
on the
thought
nose?
immediately. I thought the tree can't save us. I'm going, I know one that did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I think that like Jean and Lorna's comments then come together, I think, in a nice way with Lauren's. Somebody else, what is it? Why should dirt and fingernails make a difference to our capacity for experiencing or knowing the Trinity? Since I asked such easy questions, Kirsten, why don't you tell me why part of what you do in your farm is to re-indigenize species? Like, what is that for you in this kind of way? I mean, there may be practical reasons too, and there's beauty, like just normal things are pretty and wonderful, but like, what is it? There's a something there for you. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah. Yeah, as those of you who know me know, I'm not great at being succinct, but what comes to my mind at the moment is, for God so loved the cosmos that he gave his only begotten son. That's the text. That's the word of the text. It's not for God so loved humans.
Hmm.
It's for God so loved the cosmos that he gave his only begotten son. And we are made in the image of the creator. And called, our very first job as humans, the very first assignment we had for humans in the biblical text is the naming of things, the naming of creation. And yet here we are today, we've forgotten the names. Most of us have forgotten most of the names of the things around us. And when we name things, we know them, we see them. When we name things, we are able to come to love things. And if all of creation is the handiwork of God, and the Psalms and throughout Scripture, we're told about how creation praises God and yearns for God. If we can either, I think we sort of have a few choices. We can either ignore that and just be there alongside it. We can impede it, which we as a human species often do for our own greed, our own turning in on ourselves, as Lauren was referencing, so that life is better, easier for us. Or we can help facilitate the other species around us that were also created by God, help facilitate their praise, their voices, not, so to undo the ways we've gotten in the way, to listen to those voices and to participate with them in the praise of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And so I think getting your hands in the dirt, having your hands ragged and dry, um, pruning or helping natives breathe better is a way of participating in life as a creature together before the triune God.
Thank you,
And just even
Kirsten.
as I see Owen's hand over there on the side, it just reminds me of that's part of what, Barfield is one of the many things Barfield is reminding us to and calling us back to that I know Loren loves is recognizing that we are supposed to be in this chorus together. And in being in the chorus together, we better understand the creator as well as each other. There, see, I'm not good at being short, but that's why I write things down.
It was actually quite a good amount of things that just happened in that. And I also want to just add, as I'm cheating here, because I have the microphone, that that kneeling and planting, like that movement, the seed that falls like to death and into new life, like these are those echoes, not just of creation that are in our life, like Tolkien would say subcreation, but they're the echoes of what Loren was talking about, what C.S. Lewis talks about in Mere Christianity, which is God's always self-giving. God is always kneeling down to not just to plant, but to give of self. And so that I think that action is helpful. I do want to say if folks, if you have a disability and you can't kneel, you have to lie. I think it still works. It's just, right. Don't go too fast. Owen, what do you want to speak to?
Well, I want to answer your question, Brenton. I like it when you ask questions because then it gives me something to think about. So your question was, what does dirt under the fingernails have to do with the Trinity? Which is a quite an outrageous question, really. But the first thing that came to me is you're dealing with the microcosm and the macrocosm. The divinity of the Trinity of the divine with the dirt under the fingernails. We are going to two extremes here, but the connection there is one reflects the other. But my other question, or the one I feel more comfortable about, is the dirt there. It represents the physicality. So our relationship with the physical world is a way into the spiritual world that lies behind it. So it's all about getting to know the world in its fullest sense, in its cosmic sense. So studying and have a relationship, and we were talking about gardening and planting, is a way in, an initial way in to knowing what life forces and spiritual forces and divine forces are between that whole process of growing and dying and all the other process. So to use grandfather's words, interior is anterior, but to see the interior, you need to actually go through the physicality to then actually understand what the forces are behind that physicality. And then you start building a relationship with the spiritual world, which is a much fuller and bigger relationship to have.
Hmm, thank you. I think on your website for your grandfather's work, there's a visualization of that, is there? You have a handful of visualizations, but I may be mistaken that the interior, anterior, inside,
Yeah.
outside one. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
can't
don't think
remember.
that's there. I don't think
Okay.
that's that.
But I would encourage folks that those resources are there. If you don't immediately get everything Owen Barfield, the senior, has said, unlike the very succinct 2 minutes that Owen Barfield, the less than senior, has just spoken, which were very clear. Do not fear. Just keep reading. Like, just keep moving on. Owen Barfield's never an end. Uh, like the goal. He's always more journey. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
What Kirsten said reminded me the idea that it it was discussed a little bit in one of our other gatherings, the Wellspring meeting, uh, for some ladies, that every time we have guests um, at a meal, we just experience the light and the beauty of Trinity around our table or at our table. And it is somehow related to, yes, everything we do and actually experience is somehow participating in the beauty and holiness and amazing grace of the Trinity. And we can just expand it and say that actually being here together and feeding our hearts and thoughts with everything with heard, it is experiencing the beauty of God, of the Trinity, and this let's say generosity and sharing what we think and what we believe is just an amazing grace, actually. And we would have liked to hear anyone who is here saying at least one thing. If you would be my students, I would say, okay, one last word, everyone.
Yeah,
Can I rudely nudge Ivan?
Yeah.
Can I rudely nudge Ivan? Because Ivan teaches in this area. Ivan, you can tell me, sorry, not today, Kirsten, but I'd love to know what's dancing around your brain.
Hi, thank you so much, Kirsten. Great to see you here, and great speaking to hearing people speaking with Loren and Loren's just amazing breadth of encompassing earth history and theology and poetry and everything that is word and image and imagination and finally I think a lived devotion and a lived self-giving, so that the whole kenotic theme has been so important to me in this conversation. But out of that, I was thinking about the the question of the apophatic, and it's just a thought that was just forming around the importance of poetry and music and verse and imagination and literature and fiction writing for Lewis and for so many Christians that have formed us. And I just wonder if that's actually a kind of apophatic um, attempt to not pin down God in so many words, as we so often try to do in theology. We try to formulaically denote what God is and is not, what it means to believe and what it doesn't, and so on. But I just wonder if poetry, take that as an example, with its by taking us out of the breaking out of the constraints of grammar itself, is actually saying you can't put God into words. You have to live into who God is and take relationship into yourself. And going back to the question of fingernails in the dirt, is you have to experience and feel and touch and be with. Denise, I love what you had to say about being in conversation and being in dialogue and in this kind of connectedness across the seas. That is a kind of that is a kind of protest against the rationalistic and logocentric way in which we try to give an account of God, when within Christian tradition and faith we have also this strand that says, hold on, it's not just about putting it into words, but it's also about knowing what not to say, what is unsayable, and what can only be approached in at an angle in some askance kind of way. There's apophatic for you.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. And I think that captures the missing word for romanticism in C.S. Lewis's subtitle, which is the word that we haven't been able to find. Perhaps, the exercise of trying to find it's interesting, but we don't have to box that in, right? So,
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And it makes me think of the Ents and the Entwives, right? The Ents They were wild and they allowed the things to grow, and the Entwives, they were gardeners, and those two different kinds of being and shaping are quite different in our experience. Paul, you have a thought, but I do want to leave people with the idea of that what Denise said as the one thought, the last word, like what I call a popcorn point, where you just kind of say the thing. What is it that for you is that integrative thing that allows all of creation, the creational God, the self-giving God in creation, where that comes alive for you, and just put that in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and then. But I would like to go to Paul, whom I've lost from the screen. Are you still here, Paul?
Yeah, here I am.
Yeah, there you are.
Poetry. That's the answer to Yvonne's point, which Lewis makes in his essay on stories in the Williams Festschrift. I've written on this in the Lingua Culture because I gave this paper at one of the previous C.S. Lewis conferences in Yash. And basically, Lewis talks about, says, well, poetry would be the answer to all our communications issues. But unfortunately, most people are not poets. So we have to, I don't think he uses the phrase, but it implies dumb it down. But I think this was triggered by Yvonne's comment that basically, for Lewis, it's in poetry that we um, pull all these things together. And of course, poetry does have certainly elements in which you're going, okay, I wonder what the poet is saying here, which would again bring back all the questions we've raised about understanding the things that are not totally understandable in our terminology. So to pull it together, I guess I would agree with Lewis that poetry is where these things come together. And if we listen to Loren, um, I thought many times his uh, things that he said, they're prose, but he's very poetic. And I'm sure his book, which I've just ordered, uh, will contain a lot more elements of this. Um, so I guess we maybe need more scholar poets than we do just scholars.
Good.
Probably
Yes.
more theologians who are poets, right?
Right, that's where I think Paul Fetus's books um, address